Alone. Hello, my name is Ninon. I'm French, and my story takes place in a small countryside in the south, a place where nothing usually happens. As I tell you this story, it has now been 2 years since it happened. I was 13 years old. One evening, my parents decided to go have dinner at friend's house, but I preferred to stay home. It was a Friday night and I was tired. It's actually quite common for my parents to leave me alone at home in the evening because I rarely go with them when they go out to eat or to parties. So, I'm used to being alone at night. I must admit that I often have this feeling of being watched when I'm alone at home, whether it's day or night, but I always thought it was just paranoia. Until that night. So, we're at the infamous night when my parents go to dinner at friend's house and leave me alone. I'm watching TV on the couch with my cat, and then I decide to go back to my room to be on my phone. After several minutes, I hear noises coming from the kitchen. Actually, that's quite common. But once again, I chalk it up to fatigue and stress. Then a little later, I hear what sounds like a glass being placed on the dining table. The stress becomes more and more intense, and I do the dumbest thing to do in those moments. I went to see, and there was indeed a glass on the dining table. And it couldn't have been me because I always have a bottle in my room, and I only drink from it. The stress rises even more, but at the same time, I prefer to stay in denial and tell myself that I left the glass on the table while clearing it. As I'm about to return to my room, I hear something scratching behind the garage door. I'm about to open it, thinking it's my cat wanting to come in. But I freeze when I reach for the handle, and I remember that my cat was on the couch with me earlier. So, I turn my head to check if he's still there. And unfortunately, he is, and so is my dog. At that moment, I'm genuinely worried, and I rush back to my room. But on the way back, I notice that my parents' bedroom window and the bathroom window are wide open. At that point, I didn't know what to do, so I locked myself in my room with my cat and dog and scrolled through TikTok, trying to forget about this incident. When my parents came back, I acted as if nothing had happened. I don't really know why, but currently, no one knows about this story. Strange man walked into my backyard and watched me from my balcony. Hey everyone, I don't post much on Reddit, but I need to get out what just happened a few hours ago. This seemed like the place to put it. For some background first, I'm a 29-year-old woman. I live in an apartment in a sketchier side of my town, so I'm not unaccustomed to strange people pulling up and strange things happening. I've been through a home break-in, so I'm very hypervigilant when it comes to keeping myself and my home safe. I also smoke cigarettes, nasty habit I know, but having cats and not wanting my house to reek like smoke, I'll walk out to my balcony to smoke. That's exactly what I was doing when this happened. I was sitting on my balcony, smoking and just enjoying my night, when I notice a car I've never seen before pull into the back parking lot of my apartment right by my balcony. I initially felt a bit off, but I didn't want to come off as being the paranoid neighbor, so I keep sitting and smoking my cigarette. Then I hear footsteps making a beeline through my backyard. There's a large and burly man that I've never seen before walking briskly through my backyard. Again, I still don't try to make much of it because they might be there for my neighbor. My anxiety is definitely on alert but not in panic mode, until I realize he's going straight for my portion of the backyard. He then does something that is still freaking me out as I type this. He stops right in my backyard and looks up at me on my balcony, not saying a word. Now I'm in absolute panic mode. I audibly say, "Oh fuck no," spring up, slam and lock my balcony door, run to my upstairs bathroom, and dial 911. I listened to every sound from downstairs while I stood panicking in my bathroom, and truthfully it sounded like someone was messing with my back door. I don't know for sure because I was in hypervigilance. I do know he was in my backyard for a few minutes because I was in my bathroom for several minutes until I decided to peek out my balcony window. I saw him walking to his car and getting in. That also tells me that I don't think he was here to rob me, but something more sinister. Luckily he was Lizzie because again, I live on the cheaper side of town, so you can imagine the quality of my doors and locks. I'm really hoping it was just some guy who was drunk high and had the wrong house, but my gut is telling me otherwise. Regardless, I hope we never meet again. A repressed memory that started haunting me after almost 15 years. Until few days ago I had no idea that this has actually happened to me. I'm not going to talk about the gruesome indirect circumstances that triggered this to start haunting me in flashbacks, but I will rather focus on the story itself, how I remember it and how my cousin, who was with me when it happened, remembers it. X200B. For some context, my cousin and I are the same age. We are both women and currently 25 years old. She is only 5 days younger than me, and her family rented a floor in my parents' house when we were toddlers, so we basically did everything together and spent all our days together until we turned 5, when her family bought an apartment in another city some 30 kilometers away from the city I lived in. Since we had a very strong connection, almost codependent. It was very difficult for us to get used to not living together, and 2 years later we have made an agreement with our parents that we will visit each other each weekend, and during the summer break she will spend 1 week at our place and I will spend the other week at their place, and we will basically exchange like that until the end of the summer break. This went on for years. Since we were spending all our free time together, by the time we turned 10 or 11 we have already exhausted all our adventure ideas in the backyard: tree climbing, building a tree house, setting up tents, camping in the backyard, etc. And we really needed something new, so we have decided to go fishing together every Friday on the river near my house. It's a 20 minutes walk. Now, of course we had no tools needed for a true fishing experience. We had a butterfly net that we would place in the water, and on a good day we would catch a dozen of tiny fish with it. That was enough for a restaurant game. We would come back home, bake the fish under the sunlight, and then serve it and decorate it in plastic plates that we would later serve to our imaginary customers. We've done this for weeks and always made sure we were safe while doing it. We never actually got into the river, and that wasn't that difficult since it's a very peaceful neighborhood. We call it the Yellow Bridge, and there was usually no one else at the river at the time we were there. But one day it was different. Very different. How I remember it: a couple of days ago the memory of this encounter suddenly spilled out in my mind. We were either 10 or 11 years old and it was Friday. She was at our place that week, so we took the butterfly net and went fishing on the river. We were alone, sitting under a large willow tree right next to the river. Suddenly a man showed up from nowhere. He was standing a couple of meters away from us. He had a blackish hair with planty shades of gray, so I'm guessing he was in his late 40s or early 50s. He had a dark blue t-shirt, a little smudged on the collar. He asked us what we were doing and we said we were fishing. He continued walking back and forth on that part of the shore. Now, under the Yellow Bridge, the shore itself is at least 500 meters long. He could have gone anywhere, but he stayed where we were at. Then he came a little closer and we got up. He told us he was having issues with his wife and we just nodded our heads, trying to avoid the conversation and follow the don't talk to strangers rule. We didn't ask him anything. He took a flip phone out of his pocket and opened it in front of us. "I have to show you my wife," he said. "Okay," we replied. When he found what he was looking for, he came even closer and turned the phone towards us. It was a picture of a completely naked woman sitting in a chair with her legs spread. We just nodded. He then proceeded to show us more pictures, and it was quite clear that it wasn't his wife because the pictures weren't of the same woman, but all of them were naked, from head to toe, with their legs spread or in other very suggestive positions. Now that I think of it, the quality of the images, the fashion and the aesthetics could be best described as pornographic content from the 70s. It could be that he took pictures from some old magazine or had them sent by someone. I remember I looked at my cousin and mouthed, "It's not his wife," and she nodded. "Isn't she beautiful?" he asked. "She is," I replied, and my cousin nodded. We then remembered that we have left our net in the river, so we went back to the willow tree and reached for the net. He was standing there, in the same spot as before, looking at his phone. He then showed us a very low-quality picture of two naked men and another naked woman. This picture actually looked like pictures taken with a flip phone camera. "This is me," he said, and pointed at one of the men in the picture. We just nodded and said we had to go home. He then said the words that have been haunting me for days now: "You think my wife is beautiful? She thinks you are beautiful too. She would love to meet you. Come with me to meet her and we can play together." "No, we have to go home," I replied. "You little party breaker. Maybe your friend doesn't want to go home. Come on. I want to play with you," he said, and turned to my cousin. "No, I really want to go home," my cousin replied. This is where the details of the memory stop. What I remember next is him giving up, just not being there anymore, and us leaving, giggling and laughing as we walked away and mocking his voice and his tone on our way back home. But I found it weird that only after so many years have I remembered this situation, and I've brushed it off as a potential dream or false memory. But since his words kept echoing in my head, I called my cousin and described my memory, word for word as I've described it here, and she said that it did happen, just slightly different from how I've remembered it. How my cousin remembers it happened. All the details are correct, but once she told him she really wants to go home, he was way too close and we were scared to start running or turn our backs, since we thought that he could catch us. So we stayed there for a while and kept pretending like he was not there. We played with our catch, the tiny fish in a bucket filled with water, and talked about our fathers who work in the police. Obviously it was a lie. Her father is a forest ranger and mine works in IT, and how they're so strong that they could kill a man with one punch. The man didn't believe our exaggerated story and he kept walking in circles around us, not too close, but he did keep an eye on us the entire time. And we waited and waited and waited, and at one point he went into the bushes behind us to take a piss. This is when we got up and started running. We ran across the bridge and kept running until we got to the part of the neighborhood where there are lots of houses. When we were already close to my house, I stopped in the middle of the road and said that my legs won't move. So she helped me get down on the side of the road and we sat there until I felt better. Today I know that what I experienced was a state of shock. Once I felt better, We went back home, threw away the fish and decided to never go fishing again. We never told this to our parents because we knew that what happened had something to do with us, and at the time we thought that everything related to us is shameful and shouldn't be talked about. She said she is surprised that I thought it was a dream and that I didn't remember it until now, since I've had such an extreme reaction and she has PTSD from that event. Even today she's not going alone anywhere and is terrified whenever someone mentions the Yellow Bridge. The man with a ladder and bad intentions. When I was a senior in college a few years ago, I lived in an old house about a 5-minute walk from my campus with 5 of my girlfriends. It was still COVID times, so we spent a lot of time just in the house since we could not really go elsewhere. To preface, this house was old, and many of the windows didn't lock. Our landlord sucked, as many college ones do, and did not do anything to fix this issue. But with it being 6 of us and often a boyfriend or 2 sleeping in the house, it felt mostly safe and many of us would keep our windows open. Our college was in a town just outside of the second most dangerous city in the state, but right around the campus it felt relatively safe. When the weather started getting warmer in early spring, we would sit out on the roof to sunbathe, and this roof faced our street. We would access the roof from my roommate's, let's call her Mary, bedroom window on the 2nd floor since it led straight to the roof. Our street was residential and did not get a ton of traffic, but we did have a couple encounters of younger guys catcalling us as they drove by, but nothing seemed sinister as we were college kids. One night, late in the semester, Mary went up to her room to call her brother while the rest of us were hanging downstairs. That's when she rushed downstairs and said she saw a ladder leading up to the roof where we would all sunbathe, and right near her window, which was open. Later, we learned she said out loud to her brother what she saw before she came down. When she told us this, my other roommate and her boyfriend ran outside to find a man running away from our house with the freaking ladder, who we assume heard Mary telling her brother she saw the ladder and knew he was caught. It was dark, so they could not make out anything about him. I immediately texted our landlord asking if he had someone come by the house to do any work, and he said no. We then called the police, who came by. They did some investigating and patrolled our house for a couple nights, but we never found out who the man was, what his intentions were, or if he had been there before. So, to the creep with the ladder, let's not meet.